Hey, what's up everyone? This is Dr. Corey Glenn, and I've got a message specifically to you West Coast dentists. So many of you might know that I prefer to do most of my courses here at my farm in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and this is my happy place, and I think it's a great place to take a course. But having said that, for some reason that I can no longer remember, I let Dr. Timmy Hess talk me into coming to Seattle to do a course. So I'm going to be there on September 13th, 14th, and 15th. So we've got September 13th, a one-day course on kind of all things digital. 14th and 15th will be the guided surgery two-day course. I looked at the schedule. There's not a lot going on there at that time. I think David Spade is playing. The Mariners are playing. No one wants to really see that, but I don't see any other major protests or marches going on in Seattle, so probably a good time for you guys. And if you are a bit squeamish about coming to Tennessee for a course, this is probably that time of year where you might, want to take the course elsewhere, because we've got a lot of these guys running around. So if you are a bit squeamish about that, meet me in Seattle. Get your strongest COVID mask out and meet me at the Washington AGD, and I'll see you then.
Hey, what's up? This is Corey Glenn. I am going to do a video today on denture design in Exocad. So I've not seen much online as far as designing a denture in Exocad, and so I thought it'd be hopefully a useful video to make. And I'm going to do this in two parts. So this is going to be actually using Exocad's denture module, which I'll be real honest, I just now learned that I actually have access to. I wasn't aware I had that module, but I've been for the longest making dentures just using the basic Crown and Bridge Exocad module too. So I'll show you that. There's for sure pros and cons to both of them. And so anyway, we'll go through those. So just so you know the data I'm working with, this was a case where, we had some upper and lower bite rims, wax rims, and you can see that the wax rims were used after they were contoured and a master impression was taken inside of those. Okay, so if you ever do this, the best way I found to create your denture records, intraoral scans are not great because you're going to stretch the tissue, borders are going to be bad. Do a physical impression and then go back and scan that, preferably on a desktop scanner, so you could scan the upper denture. And I usually lay it, teeth or record side down so that you pick up all the internal, and then lower, and then rubber band them together and scan both of them together for your bite. And now that becomes your record. But what you can do with this is, if you want to digitally pour this, simply open it up in Mesh Mixer, and you can just go around here and define your border where you want it. And once you've selected all that, you can smooth the boundary if you want, but I just delete it. And now I've got this. So if I click on this anywhere on it and hit E, that's expand to connected. You can see it detaches itself, and then hit Y on your keyboard. That's the separate key. And now you have this. This would be your master model, except it's just flipped inside out. So you can either select it all or just hit Control A, and then up here under Edit, Flip Normals. Now this is your maxillary master model. All right, so that's essentially what I've done. I've got a master model for the upper, master model for the lower, and then where we started from, this is the bite scan. All right, so that's the data that we're going to be working with. So if I go into Exocad, this is going to be for upper and lower complete dentures. I'm going to go ahead and click on a tooth, and we're going to tell it we're doing full dentures. Now, you've got multiple options here. You can tell it you're going to do a printed base with carded teeth. I don't love that because those carded teeth don't bond all that well to the printed bases in my experience. Now, a milled base will, but even then, it's I would rather have one continuous horseshoe of teeth that I can bond into a base. And I think dentures, the materials have caught up to go with printed materials. They work really well. So I like to choose printed base and printed teeth. And we're going to use a bite rim scan. We don't need any virtual extractions. And since we're using printed teeth, it'll print whatever shape we give it. You would want to lock your scaling if you were going to use, say, carded teeth, because those teeth already exist, right? You're going to have to just fit them into the sockets that are created. So if you accidentally scale your teeth up and down, Well, now that's not true to what you actually have on the card of teeth. So I'm going to allow this since I am doing printed, and we can just tell it we're doing upper and lower arches. And so that defines our prescription. Let's save it. And now we'll go to design. All right, so the first thing it wants is your upper jaw scan. So that's your maxillary master model. Then it's going to want your lower master model. And then it's going to want your bite rims. All right, and so we've got to define up and down for Exocad. So that looks good. We'll go right there. All right, now with this model analysis, so this is actually one thing I don't like about using the actual denture module is that you're going to have to do this model analysis, which frankly I don't get that much benefit out of. It's going to somewhat position the teeth, but I would do all that based on just eyeballing it using the same principles. But if you want to get through this quicker, I would just choose basic model analysis. It's going to want you to define the plane. So I'm going to just define it using 3 points. And what I'll do is just click on my bite rim. Actually, that should have been the left. So I'll just try to get it lined up right on that. There's our midline. There's our right. And as you can see, that defines for it a plane that is going to be what your teeth get lined up on. Click next. Mark the incisive papilla by clicking on its center. So right there. Click on each hamular notch, or actually on the tuberosity. So, you know, with all of this, no patient's mouth is perfectly symmetric. And what it's going to do is it's setting things like midline and all that kind of stuff based on this. So, imagine a patient had a terrible extraction and their tuberosity's blown out here. Be thinking about the fact that you're just trying to get symmetric points on either side. And so I'm not terribly concerned that this is perfect. I just want to make it somewhat symmetric. What I do want to see is that this midline plane that's generated, remember, it's just splitting the difference between those two tuberosity points that you put. I do want to make sure this is tracking right down the midline for this patient. Okay, so if it was not, usually you're going to see that midline palatal raphe. You could rotate this to get it where it is right in the center of that, but this looks good. I'll click next. All right, now it wants you to mark the end of the first rugae by clicking on them. And so that's going to more or less correspond to your canine points. So I'll go right there. And again, I'm not necessarily trying to be exact with the rugae. I'm more trying to keep the symmetry. Down here, this ridge is pretty worthless. And so define the first premolar positions on the lower jaw. I don't know where the first premolar positions are. I'm going to guess it's right, somewhere in here. Now mark each retromolar pad. And again, most times dentists are not the greatest about picking up that retromolar pad. You really do need to get your retromolar pad because that determines a lot about the stability for this patient's denture, because that's one of the few portions of the mandibular anatomy that's not going to change with bone loss and function and all that kind of stuff. All right, and then it is again positioning a midline. Now this is not a symmetrical mandible. All right, so you can see that doesn't look all that symmetric to me. I would probably go right there. And then it wants you to define the center line of the ridge. All right, so this looks pretty good. I probably need to pull this line over just a bit. That side I think looks good, so we'll go with that. Find the first molar positions. I mean, heck, I don't know, somewhere here. This is one of the things I don't have to do though if I'm using the other module. All right, So now we've done the basic model analysis. And so based on what you just provided it with that information, it's going to say, hey, you don't have enough space for second molars. Well, do I really not? I mean, I can scale the teeth, right? So I'm going to tell it to place them anyway. And then based on that, it has now thrown in some denture teeth. All right. Now we can choose different teeth. So this is one thing that you will not get if you're doing it in the conventional crown and bridge module. Those are very highly anatomic teeth, which usually for a denture, having more of a flat plane posterior or lingualized occlusion is better. Now you could make your own libraries and stick them in there, but it is nice that this does have the teeth already set up. And you can see that we've got different options for this. I'm going to go with these medium teeth. On our anteriors, this is a male patient, and he's probably going to have larger anterior teeth. And so we're going to go with this. All right, so it's going to have a little bit different functionality from probably what you're accustomed to in the regular crown and bridge module. You can see if I grab the distalmost molar, I can pull these things around. But when I do that, it's not scaling the opposing side. Let's see, when I pull this side, it's going to go to the contralateral canine, but it's not going to go all the way with the other molar. I can grab on the canines and I can scale anterior teeth like this. I would really prefer just to have the normal chain functionality like you typically would have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these things back. And I'm going to not worry about those posterior teeth right now. What I do want to do is get my anteriors set. All right, so I will pull this up, get my midline set. So remember, we've marked canine lines, and so I'm going to line everything up to the canine about right there. I'm going to try to get them on my occlusal plane. So the functionality for moving teeth is just not quite as intuitive for me because I'm used to using just the normal Exocad tooth chain. I'm sure we could get to the point where I'm comfortable with it. I'm just really not there yet. All right, so that looks pretty good. All right, we're pretty well along the contours of our rims. Takes a little bit of this inclinations. I like where the centrals are at right now, so I'm going to lock them and I'm going to pull these canines up. So think about just setting denture teeth, right? You're going to want to get the canines and the centrals roughly on the same plane, and then the lateral about 0.5 to 1 millimeter off. Okay, I like my anterior 6. And now I'm going to set my mandibular anteriors to that. And so here's one of the keys with dentures. If you get these mandibular teeth too far off of the top of the ridge, man, you're going to have a lot of trouble with denture stability. And so this is where you might end up sacrificing a little bit of your aesthetics to tuck the teeth back more, or you might end up having more of an anterior open bite. All right, and that's just a sacrifice and a compromise you've got to be, okay with, or the patient's got to be okay with, if they want this denture to not, fall out every time they bite something with their anterior teeth. So I'm looking at that lower model, and I don't feel very comfortable going much further off the front of the ridge than that. I don't even really like it that much. So let's just stop there for the moment. All right, so notice here, I'm pretty good on my maxillary teeth according to my rim position, but I don't like how far off the ridge we are with the lower anteriors. So I don't want to go further than that. So I'm going to compromise a little bit on the positions of my maxillary teeth to bring them back and have a bit more of a natural bite. Okay, so we can work with that. So I'm going to lock my anterior teeth now so that we don't screw those up. Posterior teeth, all right, we're going to have to move them as a unit up. Now bear in mind, you've got drawn on here the top of the ridge. So do I want to be that far off the ridge? I probably don't. In an ideal world, I'd have my mandibular buccal cusps, which are the functional cusps, centered over the top of that for maximum stability. I'm going to compromise that just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just free this up where I can play with my maxillary teeth, my mandibular teeth individually. So I think I would like to go ahead and get my mandibular arch set first. Get it on the ridge somewhat. All right, that looks fairly good. This side can come in a bit. I like it there, but I'm going to bow these out just a bit. All right, and now we'll play with the maxillary arch independent of that. So that doesn't look too bad, honestly. Probably come down just a hair right there. This side, obviously, I've pulled in more, so this side is going to have to come in, get those teeth in the fossa. Now, this is probably just some mistake I'm making, but I didn't like the change I made right there, and I went to undo it with Control Z, and it didn't work. So I'm not sure why that is. So maybe not perfect, but good enough for demonstration purposes. All right, so we're going to go with that for our setup. I'm going to click Next. And so now we can do our free-forming. All right, so one of the nice things about using printed teeth or milled teeth even is that you're going to be able to generate kind of a little bit of interference so that when it subtracts that away, you're going to have a very socked in occlusion. And so, for example, right here, I don't like that there's just a single point of contact. What if I just took this and pulled the entire tooth upward? All right, now I've got a bit more of a cusp fossa thing going on. Get these where they're partially visible. And I don't want to, again, I don't want to get my mandibular teeth any farther off the ridge than I currently am. And so here I can start tucking back those anteriors, maybe just to reach the mandibular teeth. I still want to make sure I'm staying on track with my midline. So that looks good. And then you could play with individual tooth parts. Do I want to take maybe just the incisal edge up, like that one? I don't know how I got that tooth out of whack, but I need to bring that entire tooth down. And then if I wanted to do individual tooth parts, I could just grab the whole bottom of this tooth, pull that up. And I want to be mindful here as I'm looking at this, like, I don't want just tiny teeth sitting in a sea of pink. So in this scenario, like, I think I've got the room to simply take all of these teeth and make them a bit longer. So like down here, for example, if I was to lock the equator, then I can just grab all of this and pull it down. I've got tons of room underneath them to still play with. All right, I suppose I wanted to, bulk these teeth up a little bit. I can grab just sides of teeth and pull them this way or that if I don't want such large embrasures. Okay, so now let's dial in our occlusion. So usually I'll do that by adjusting on the lower arch. So I'm going to hide the upper arch. And we could do this by just pulling individual cusps down if we wanted to do that. But my goal is I want to get everything into mostly dark blue. All right. So the best way I've found to do that is just to use the add and remove. Don't use super high strength. Go down on your strength a little bit. And then I can just get on here. I don't generally like to use the smooth, because smooth is just going to mute out all your anatomy. So as I get to now, I'm tackling smaller and smaller areas. I just make my spot size smaller. All right, we're mostly dark blue. And if you want to, you can split the difference. If you felt like you needed a little bit more, then I would turn it over and I'd make the other portion of my adjustments on the maxillary arch, just to keep things somewhat even. So maybe wherever I see light blue still present, like right here, I'll do that on the maxilla. All right. Now, do you want anterior tooth contact? If you do, then you're probably going to want to close some of that with your maxillary teeth, right? So maybe I come in here and bump this up on the maxillary jaw. Just curious how much it would take to add. Okay, so I really had to bulk that up quite a bit, and I don't like how much I did there. So I think I'm okay actually leaving a little bit of a space between the anteriors. We're going to be socked in from canine over. And then as I'm giving this a once over, the thing that's jumping out at me is, one, the asymmetry of these. You know, again, this is part of what screws me up a little bit with the change in the chain function here. Is I didn't catch until just now how asymmetric my right to left side is. And then the other thing I'm noticing is this tooth. So I'm going to go back to anatomic and let's just use tooth parts. And I'm going to try to pull this whole portion of this tooth over. I've got lock equator on, so I'm going to undo those last two changes, hopefully. Good enough for a demo. All right. The asymmetry part, I don't love it. Now that I'm just seeing that, I would go back and I would go to the former stage where we had the chain functionality. But in doing that, I'm going to lose all this stuff that I've just done. You know what? For demonstration, let's just move forward with it. This is new enough to me that I haven't mastered the way that all the functionality plays nice with one another. All right, so a couple of important things that you do need to know here. So I want you to look just at this maxillary arch for the moment. You know, those teeth, I've pulled them down to where they're in pretty close proximity to the arch. So imagine if we don't trim some of the distance of these teeth down to our tissue, what you're going to end up with is your printed pink base that's going to be paper thin in areas because the teeth are impinging all the way through it. And that creates a couple of problems. One, your base is not going to print as nicely being that thin. Sometimes it'll fail in those areas. What I want to do for uh, my intaglios of the teeth is I want those things cut back and leaving about a millimeter of space there. All right, so I definitely want to cut in my static occlusion. So we'll adjust that. There's no point messing with your proximal contacts. Those aren't going to really do anything. I'm not seeing here the intersection with the model. All right, so I guess I'm going to have to do that manually. So I'll do that by just grabbing tooth parts. I'm going to lock the equator and I'm going to just open this up a little bit. And that's going to maintain a little bit of thickness between the bottoms of my teeth and the tissue so that my base isn't just paper thin in those areas. And I believe everywhere else is okay. Let's check the same on the lower. The lower doesn't look like it has those problems, so we should be good here. All right, let's click next. All right, so this is something you're going to lose if you do this in the conventional crown and bridge module, which is that, you know, when you generate this big chain of teeth, that's going to get printed in white, your base is going to get printed in pink, and you've got to fit those two together. So they've all got to have a common path of draw. So there's a little cheat step that I do to overcome that, but it adds a step. Here, it's built for this, and so it's going to account for that. So this is the path of draw it's proposing for all of these teeth. I think that looks okay. You know, normally I would probably want these coming in from a bit more of a anterior direction, about like that. All right, and I'm going to apply that. On the blockouts, you know, it's going to build in a 0.03 offset. You know, that's just think of a little bit of a spacer. How much of an angle are you going to block out? You know, less than 30. I would allow these undercuts up to 1 millimeter on your denture base itself. Everything else looks good, so I'll apply that. All right, so this blue is whatever blockout it needs to do plus that 0.03 offset. We're going to click next. Now we got to do the same thing for the bottom. So I'll just shut up and let you know, do this real quick. Okay, so now we're at the stage to propose our denture base perimeter. So I'm going to just quickly go around here and draw out my perimeter. And now I'm doing the same on the lower. I don't know why it has given me this crazy dark model. It's really hard to see. There we go. I don't know why that did that. But anyway, draw the perimeter for the lower. Okay, so because we're doing, you know, a one-piece roundhouse shoe of horseshoe of denture teeth, it's going to propose some connectors. And on your connectors, let's hide those. I do like to have them apically positioned down here at the bottom because if you think about this, you know, printing that denture base is going to, if you've got your connector way up high here, then you're going to get all these fins and everything that, you know, there's more potential for print issues and fit issues and all that kind of stuff. I like them to just be way up there high. So I'm pretty happy with where those are. I'm going to just click next. All right. And so here is your opportunity to festoon. So at this point, you're going to notice the inside is irrelevant. Don't even worry about that. You're just looking at your exterior here. So I'm going to use my oops. This is the tool where you can just drag it out, and that makes big changes very quickly. Or you can use your free tools. I don't really care about those areas back in the back being, you know, perfectly thick. But I do want to go into my free forming tools and use the add and remove. And in areas like this, we're going to bulk that up. All right. I'm going to bulk up right there a little bit. And I'll go back and hit those with the smooth tool. You know, I like a denture base, especially when it's printed to printed. I don't want to bury these teeth completely down into the printed base. I like to have a little tooth sticking up. I think it looks more like natural teeth would. So I like to leave more of the teeth exposed, kind of like you see here. Whereas if you're doing like an acrylic denture, you know, you've got to bury a significant amount of that tooth. But here it's going to be, um, you know, it's going to be printed resin to printed resin. I'm not worried about those debonding with one another. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go around and smooth. You know, the gingival proposals in Exocad, they're pretty decent, but you do get sometimes these, you know, real angular root prominences that I'll just go back and hit with a smoothing tool. Because as much as we dentists like to put in gingival anatomy and stuff on a denture, pretty much every patient I've ever put those on, they look great in pictures, and the patient's like, "Hey, we smooth all this crap off because it's rough to my tongue and whatever." So I like it just smooth on the inside here and on the buccal. And there again, some of those really thick root prominences, let's just smooth those back. Same on the top. All right, I like that. So let's click next. Okay. And this is why, again, I don't claim to be an expert with this, but this is why I wasn't finding the ability to cut back the intaglio of those teeth is because it's here. How thick do we want to make sure the denture base is everywhere, including in the bottom of the socket? I like to have that be about 0.75 to 1 millimeters. We'll go with zero point 0.8. So what that means is anywhere that it finds these teeth closer than 0.8 millimeters, it's going to cut the tooth back to that point so that your socket has a minimum thickness to it of that amount. I just forgot. That's why I didn't find that in the earlier step. Tooth pocket gap. That is, what is your spacer between, you know, you're going to print the teeth in white and then you're going to have the sockets in pink. How big of a spacer is there between those? 0.2 is the default. I would say that's about the right amount. Your tooth pocket blockout angle, you want it 0 because you want everything to have one uniform path of draw. And that's all looking pretty good. If you're going to be milling this stuff, there's some other considerations you may have to take in about, you know, milling tool diameters and all that kind of stuff. I'm not worried about that here. We're pretty good on this. I'll just apply it and then we'll click next. Okay, so that step took a minute or two, but it's finalized, and all it was doing there was bridging the teeth together, and it was also trimming the teeth back from the model to maintain that 0.8 thickness. So I'm going to click next now, and then it's going to be the same story for the lower. I'm going to bump that up. So we have to do this twice. Let's apply it. All right, the same has been done for the lower, and next. So this is the final step where it's going to merge everything. It's going to subtract out the sockets, all of that fun stuff. So we'll give this a second to process. And here's the final result. So you can see our dentures. Now we could go ahead and freeform additionally if we wanted to, but I'm not going to for this. Let's look at the list of final parts. You're going to have two bases, and then you're going to have your upper arch of teeth and your lower arch of teeth. So let's just hide this. You can see our teeth, and looks like the only place that they ended up having to be trimmed was a little bit right there. And then there you see our sockets. So if I turn all this back on, that's our final results. So let's export and save this. Go to right click on save, and let's export scene to mesh. And you can save it right here in your CAD directory. You can also save it to wherever else you want. Here I'm going to just save it on my downloads. I'm going to save them all four together and then show you how I just break those apart. I always, always, always use the original coordinate system of data. Because remember, when we brought it into Exocad, we redefined the up, down, side to side for the program's language. And so if you export in its current default position, it's going to be out of orientation with the original models you started with. But if I choose that, then coming back here to the models that we were playing with earlier, let's now import those dentures that I just saved. They're in my downloads. They're right there. And as you can see, they're properly oriented to my original models. All right. You can see it's a nice intimate fit, but it's not impinging into the models anywhere. Everything looks good from that front. There's a couple little tiny areas, and that's just where it smooths the surface a little bit in those jagged areas. So I'm not concerned about it. All right. How would I break these apart? All right. Because what you need is 4 individual files to be able to print these. So I could go right here, select anywhere, and then E is expand to connected. So the only thing technically connected is that upper base, and then hit Y. I'm going to do the same for the lower, just the base, E, and hit Y. So now as you can see, those are individual files. Now I just need to break apart the upper and lower teeth. And I could have exported each of these individually from Exocad. That would have worked too. I could have gone to the directory folder. I can just do this as quick here as anywhere. So the only thing about doing it here is I'm going to have to resave these now. So I would export this as the upper teeth. I can export these as lower teeth. This is upper base. This is the lower base. So while that's going on, let's talk about one other thing. So I really like this for a 2-piece denture. I like its connectors. I like the controls of building in the tooth gaps and all that kind of stuff, paths of draw. Things I don't like. What if all you wanted was a monolithic denture? All right. Well, we don't really have the data here to export for this. And so what I would have to do if I wanted to do that is I'm going to turn these off, and we've got these. But notice, if I wanted to make a monolithic denture out of this, then I'm going to have to do an extra step here. So I just want to do this for maybe one arch. All right, I want you to look at what files I've got turned on. I've got this blue, that's the internal surface of the denture. I've got the pink, this is the denture base, but before it's done any of the subtraction. And then I've got the upper teeth. All right, so let's say if I wanted to do a monolithic denture, let's save this. All right, and let me pull in what I just exported. Upper monolithic, I guess it's still exporting. No, it's right here. Actually, no, that's not it. And go figure, it crashed itself out. So what I was going to show there is what I would have to do is open up that denture base and the teeth, right, and combine those. And then I would have to Boolean subtract out that internal surface to make this into a one piece, and now that would be saved. If you want to make a monolithic denture, don't do it in this module. I'm just telling you the basic crown and bridge module is my preferred method for doing that. So I'll quit with this one here. That's kind of a sloppy job, just showing you the big picture of the Exocad Denture Module. And then part two, I'll show you the pros and cons of doing it just in the base crown and bridge module.